Hello everyone, welcome back to Oneg Shabbat. Today we will be discussing Parashat Teruma. In Parashat Teruma Tetzaveh we move on to discuss the Mishkan Vekelav. Parashat Teruma discusses mostly the Mishkan. Parashat Tetzaveh goes more towards the Kohanim. What I want to focus on is one specific mitzvah which you find in Aron HaBrit, and that mitzvah has to do with the badim of the Aron. Every single kli had badim, meaning the long wooden poles. They had those long wooden poles in order to enable them to move through the desert, meaning Amichai had to carry them through the desert. That's what the badim were for. But only in the Aron we find a very special mitzvah. In Perek Kafhei Pasuk Tetvav, it says betabeot Aron yiyu badim lo yasuru mimenu, which means in the Aron has the badim are said are the poles, the tabeot are the rings which the poles go inside. Betabeot Aron yiyu badim lo yasuru mimenu, you are not allowed to take out the poles out of the badim. Now this may have caused trouble afterwards in Bait Rishon and Sheni, depending on the size of Kodesh HaKodashim, how the Kohen was able to get miben shnei badim. With the Paruch it was a little difficult, but more than that, why is the Torah telling us this tzivui? What's the point of tabeot Aron yiyu badim lo yasur mimenu? This isn't something it's tam, it's mamash mitzvat lo ta'aseh. The Rambam is posek in Sefer HaMitzvot, in Osnei Yichot Kli HaMikdash, שבטבעות הארון יהיו הבדים לא יסור ממנו, and if someone takes the badim out, הוא עבר על מצוות לא תעשה והוא לוקה. So the question is why? Why does the Aron have this special mitzvah? Parashat wanted to offer that maybe it comes to show the Torah is always dynamic, the Torah is always ready to move, the Torah isn't there specifically in one place. What I want to show is maybe that there's something bigger that has to do with this through a different story in Tanakh, and that is the story of Peretz Uzzah. In Shmuel Bet in Perek Vav, we learn about David bringing the Aron to Yerushalayim. So we know that he tried doing it 2 times. The first time he tried, it failed. Uzzah ended up dying. The Aron did not make it to Yerushalayim. The second time he tried, he succeeded, and the Aron was able to make it to Yerushalayim, and everything went well. Now, obviously, the question is, what changed between the first and the second one? We compared these two. Why was the first try unsuccessful, while the second was successful in bringing Aron HaBrit? So different interpretations have been brought in this. Some have said that maybe the first one was a little too wild. The second hala was less wild. There were more olot, meaning they were able to be happy, but remember midat hayira. But one important thing to notice the difference between them is to notice where the Aron is. The Aron in the first time which the Aron was brought up during the failure, it says in Perek Vav Pasuk Gimel, vayarkivu et Aron ha'Elohim el agala chadasha, and from there vayisem et edav asher b'giv'ah, and Uzzah was riding the agala. The agala seemed to have some sort of a problem. It looked like it was falling off. Which means the Aron seemed to be falling off of the agala. Uzzah has to put his hand, touch the Aron, and he is killed. Now, the question is, why did they go against the Torah? The Torah itself says, "Bakatef isau betabeot Aron yiyu badim lo yasur mimenu." Now, Rav Samet, an interesting ma'amar about this parasha, says more than that. He claims the mitzvah betabeot Aron yiyu badim lo yasur mimenu. The whole point of that mitzvah is to make sure bakatef isau, which means the reason you keep the badim inside is to make sure that it's taken in such a fashion that it's not put in agala but put on the shoulder. That's essential to be put on the shoulders. But David and Amichai make a mistake during this first time. They put it on an agala. It's an interesting place. We have an agala, we have a carriage. On the carriage we see the Aron that has the badim inside. It's able to be carried, but it's not carried. Instead of that, it's brought inside the agala, against the lava meforash b'Torah. The second time that David tries bringing it, then we see it's something completely different. We see in Pasuk Yudale de David mecharker bechol oz, David avush efod bad. And before that, it says in Pasuk Yud Gimel, "Vayiki tzadu nose'ei Aron Adonai shisha tzeadim ba'izbach shor umri." We see here, how do they take the Aron the second time? They take it on their shoulders. People are carrying it. They're taking it the way that it should be taken. It is just a technicality. It just thus there was a mitzvah to carry bakatef. They didn't carry bakatef, and therefore something bad happened. Or is there something deeper here? I'd like to share a beautiful idea I heard from a shiur from Rav Samet. And Rav Samet said the following thing. He said when the Aron is carried in an agala, it seems to be that the agala itself is also something significant, meaning the agala gets its own kind of ma'amad. It's a beautiful carriage. It seems to be that the Aron is carried by something that's significant. But when you carry the Aron on the katef, when you put it on your own shoulder, what you're showing is the Aron en od milvado. What you're showing is that the Aron doesn't have anything else carrying it. The Aron does not need anything. The Aron is there by itself. It is not dependent on anything. Now obviously the Aron is the climax of the Mikdash. It's inside Kodesh HaKodashim. הקדושים מבין הבדים, only go there once a year. The Aron is the center of Bet HaMikdash. That is the most important part of Bet HaMikdash. What the idea of the Aron being only taken on shoulders and not being taken in Nagala comes to show that the Mikdash, the Shekhinah, Hashem are not dependent on anything. The Aron, the Torah, Hitgalut HaShekhinah are not dependent on anything. People carry them because that's the way that people show that this is what it is and there's nothing else and it's not dependent on anything. If you put the Aron in an Agala, it becomes dependent on the Agala. When you put it on the shoulders, you put it, it comes to show just like a king is being carried, it shows the Kabbalah of the Marut, it shows that you take the Aron, it shows that you accept the Aron as the superior, shows you accept the samchut of the Aron, and obviously what the Aron symbolizes, which is the Torah, the Hitgalut, and Hashem. So when you put it in an Agala, what you're showing is you're showing that the Aron is dependent on something else. The Aron is dependent on the Agala. It seems to be that the Kedusha is dependent on something, and that exactly is the problem. The problem is when you carry it not in your katef, you don't realize that Hashem does not need anything, but rather you need Hashem, and that's something very critical throughout Binyan Mishkan, is to remember that Hashem does not need this. As Shlomo himself said when he built Bet HaMikdash, Hine Hashamayim u'shmei Hashamayim lo yechalkelu cha'av ki habayit hazeh asher baniti. Hashem does not need the house. V'asu li mikdash v'shachanti betocham, not betocho. The Hashrat Shekhinah is inside Am Yisrael, betocham. Hashem does not need this. This is symbolized with the fact that the Aron, the height, the climax of the Mishkan is carried bakatef and not carried through an agala. And that may have been the mistake that was made the first time with David. David takes up the Aron, he thinks the Aron maybe will help him solidify his place as the king. It's brought in Agala. There are other purposes. That's why it failed. The second time the Aron is brought bakatef, the Aron is brought because of the Aron. The Aron is brought, the correct place for the Aron is to be in Yerushalayim, to be in a makom asher yivchar Hashem. And that is the sole purpose. The Aron does not need the king needs the Aron. And that's why bakatef pisal, that mitzvah comes to symbolize exactly that. Comes to symbolize that Hashem is not dependent on us. We are dependent on Hashem. We carry it directly on us, just as the king was carried in the ancient days, to show that we accept Hashem, that we accept the Shekhinah, that we accept the Torah is something that leads us, and not Chalila that Hashem needs us, but rather that we need Him. Shabbat Shalom, everyone.